Huh. Wow, we've started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the First Kids podcast. My name is Chisom,
And I'm Gaju.
and we are here to just talk about our experiences being the first kids in our family. So, who is the first kid? We're basically the pioneers in our family, the ones who have to go into the unknown and figure shit out as we go. We are the international students that our parents just send over to a foreign country to figure shit out and hopefully don't come back poor. We are the eldest daughters that are meant to take care of everyone. We are the first generations who start off our lives in a whole new country. And I guess if you're a first kid, welcome to your community. Gosh,
Yes,
you did.
welcome, welcome.
Yeah, exactly. And I think should we talk about ourselves? Should we say anything about ourselves? Um, was that okay? I think it's
No,
okay.
I
Yeah.
think that was a nice intro though.
Okay, perfect. So in today's podcast, we're going to be talking about income inequality and class in America specifically, because that was one of the first things I noticed or I had to deal with when I moved to America. To give some context, I and Gazi were actually roommates. What year were we roommates again? I think
My
2018,
junior year,
2019,
my sophomore year.
sophomore
So
year.
your
Okay.
junior year.
Yes. I don't know. We were both math majors. This is
Yeah.
um, anyway, we were both
Anyway, we
roommates,
were
and
roommates.
we went to St. Mary's College in Indiana, and we also took our engineering classes at the University of Notre Dame. And I guess, gosh, you like, when was the first time you realized, like, damn, we are in a rich person's school? Like, this is not a school like the rest of America.
I guess for me, it was when I realized that some kids just weren't as stressed about passing grades, or they
Mm,
actually wanted to stay like a fifth year just to have fun and have the college
mm,
experience. And I was like y'all don't realize this tuition money is a thing. Like, and I mean, yeah, I think mostly like when I saw that, like, I just didn't have those, I just couldn't afford to not like pass a class. I couldn't afford to
mm,
be there more than 4 years. And that had like a
mm,
lot of stresses that I had because of
mm,
my socioeconomic standing that other students didn't have.
mm,
I was like,
mm,
y'all are comfortable. That's nice. What about you?
mm. I think the first time I realized it was actually two times that really stuck out to me. Was once when a classmate said her grandparents said for them to help pay for college, she had to go to a Catholic school. And I was like, you have more than your parents trying to contribute to this mission. And then there was a time where a friend of ours, her sister who went to Notre Dame, talked about how kids used to drop MacBooks at those donation bins they used to have at the end of the year, where they would take out all the trash and someone dropped their MacBook there. And then at the end of the year, because we had nothing, we're international students, like I would look forward to that time because I would just like steal a fridge. I was not stealing, but like I'll just take a fridge because people used to leave like their fridges there, and they just used to leave these things that I'm like, even if I got a new one, I'm gonna still keep this thing because I know how hard it is to have this kind of shit. So I think it was just realizing that a lot of things that I that were not disposable to me were very disposable to other people.
Mm, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I always look forward to that time of the year too. I get a couch.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Like they'll just get rid of a whole
yeah.
couch. And sometimes like I realized it's also because like America is structured in such a way where sometimes it's easier to replace things than to like hold on to a new one. So like sometimes the futon might not be that great, but like it might be cheaper if the person lives far away to just order a new one than to lug a those move-in vans to try to move it back to their hometown during breaks. And even like pre-moving to America, did you feel like you had a good conception of what class was like in America?
No, no, not at all. Because I mean, like back home, I would consider my
Mm,
family like middle class. I was very comfortable. Like,
mm,
there's nothing that I missed. Like growing up, there's nothing like I felt like I was missing. Like the concept of going to
Mm,
on holidays was very foreign to me. But you know, it's not like I
mm,
missed anything that I didn't know existed, right? So I was totally fine, and I thought
mm,
like my life would still remain comfortable when I went to the U.S.
mm,
And I mean, in high school,
mm,
it was very sheltered because everybody kind of had the same living situation. It was a boarding school. But when I went to college
mm,
is where I saw, okay, like people live different. But again, I wasn't bothered by it. It was like just realizing it and then acknowledging it and then just kind of feeling like, if anything, I was motivated. I was like, okay, like
yeah.
this is what's out there. This is what other people live like. I want that for myself and my kids. That's it.
Mm. You
What
know,
about
it's
you?
so interesting and I was about to say it's so interesting that you bring up like boarding school because the reason why like at least my boarding school they would force so many things on us like uniforms like making sure we all did looked and behaved a certain kind of way was to like like to prevent us from seeing our socioeconomic class. But we found new ways of showing class. Like we found the kids who went abroad for holidays would bring the foreign pens and the foreign stationery, and the kids who stayed in Nigeria would now bring the local ones. So even though they tried so hard to prevent us from seeing class, we clearly knew the kids who on visiting days their parents could feed like an army, and the kids who on visiting day they would just be at the corner by
Mm,
themselves. And so even though they tried their best to prevent class from like showing, it always found a way of doing so. And even the idea of holiday, I hate the fact that like a lot of Europeans can actually go for holiday cheaply because they're in Europe. Like it's actually very easy for them to just get like a cheap flight from like Dublin to somewhere else and stay in a cheap hotel and actually have fun. But because like
mm-hmm,
travel within Africa is so expensive, I wonder if how
mm-hmm.
many other kids this holiday thing would not have been a problem for if I could easily have gone to other West African countries or other even outside of West African countries. Yeah.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, what's the bottom line though?
What's what do you mean?
I mean, okay, so class still shows itself, even if it's a boarding school where
Yeah.
everybody's tried, it looks the same, dressed the same, and then you go to college and then you see that huge difference. Do you think that
Difference.
that affected you negatively?
I mean, I feel like my family lost a lot of its money during my secondary school days, so I already saw the impact. Like I think when I was in like
Mm,
SS2, that was like the year before your final year, I already kind of knew if we're going to do this mission of me going abroad, it was not going to be easy. And then we can talk about how like
mm-hmm,
Nigeria going into two recessions caused 50 million more problems. But like I already kind of knew it was twofold for me because I went to one of the best boarding schools, not just in Nigeria but in West Africa. Like being close to people who have wealth gives you so many privileges you can't even imagine. Like when we were
mm-hmm,
doing preparing for SATs and TOEFL and all these other exams, right? Literally, our hallways were lined and littered with SAT books because even though I could not get the best SAT books, right? All those rich kids who it was kind of disposable for them could get it. And they were kids. We didn't know the value of these things. So literally, I'm telling you, our hallways were aligned with these things. And so by virtue of being close to these people, you everybody already there was this idea that going abroad was not something that was so far-fetched. Also, like I remember like
mm-hmm,
post graduation, I realized that like every Ivy League school there's out there, there's a Loyola person who went there. And so even though those kids were very smart and sometimes very rich, just knowing that they were my classmates literally beside me and they were going to the Harvards and the Yales made these places seem far smaller than they actually are, far easier to get into than they actually are. So like I knew that like I wasn't nearly as rich as my classmates, but I also knew that just by virtue of being close to them, there were so many benefits that like I got without necessarily deserving it. I also like there was always this thing that always used to go through my head, and it still goes through my head today. So Loyola was in Gidamangoro, and that's like in the outskirts of Nigeria. Like that's far away from most the main part of Nigeria. And what that means is that it's
mm-hmm,
in a community that's not well developed. So literally, when you're going into Loyola, you are seeing all the places where like people who have a significantly lower quality of life than we have in this school, that's like rich upper middle class, like top 1%, top 10% of Nigerians, even not even top 10, like top 5% of Nigerians have access to. And because we were around the school, like in Gidamongoro, like I was radically aware that yes, I might not be as rich as my classmates, but damn, I am very lucky because there's nothing that made me deserve my
Mm-hmm.
circumstance more than they did, you know? So I think even
Yeah.
though like I was radically aware of class, I always also even felt like I believe kind of in the system that if you worked hard, you could actually move classes. It was until I actually came to America that I saw how because in Nigeria, like there's this idea that like you could just one day be lucky. Like we're all riding on luck. It's all vibes. Like legitimately, one day you meet the right politician, the person who becomes into power will be your friend. Like it's all vibes. But like in
Yeah.
America, it was like seeing how like class could be institutionalized. How like if you moved into a rich enough neighborhood, there are laws that prevent like you the housing prices will be so expensive that nobody else can move in, and then those property taxes will now fund the school. So creating a system that like kind of kept people out versus Nigeria is like, hey, if my governor wins this year, I'm going to blow. Like it's like I think for me that was like the one thing about the American class system is that it actually had so much more structure versus the class
Yeah.
system I was used to.
Okay. I guess no. In Rwanda, it's a little bit I mean, it's still vibes, I guess, a little bit, but it's also there's still like a lot of structure here. I see. I've never been to Nigeria, but I
Mm.
hear it's chaotic. So I
Fam,
don't think I
Lagos is
don't think
chaotic. I live in Abuja. Sorry.
Abuja is not chaotic.
It's far less, but don't worry about it. Still chaos though. Never mind.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for me, I guess it was just I always assumed at least I had never had ambitions of becoming rich because I was comfortable
Mm,
when I was growing up. I was like, okay,
mm,
I just want to keep this life of comfort. And then I went to the
mm,
US and then I saw like just how much money people could make. And then I
mm,
was struggling financially in school and I saw
mm.
like the impact of not having money. Like I lived
Yeah.
through what it's like being broke, like broke. And
Mm,
like having had that experience of not having money is what
mm,
changed like my motivations of I don't even want to be rich. I want to be wealthy. Like I want to be in
mm.
such a position that my grandkids don't have to experience what you and I experienced in college because that shit was
Mm.
like the pits.
Yeah, it was ghetto.
Like
Yeah.
being stressed about like like okay, we have this many passes in the dining hall, you go and then we have
Yeah.
Tupperware to put the
Mm.
food. That
Would-
like you are so stressed about the small things that even like
Yeah.
focusing on bigger things like your degree, like just the smallest things have such a big impact
That's
that
on you.
when you
Mm.
have money you don't have to worry about.
Yeah. I
So
legitimately
yeah,
like I
I
have
guess that's what class did for me.
mm. I legitimately have so much like resentment whenever I see my transcript because you could see how my performance just dropped over the years as my family's financial situation became so much harder. And I always just imagine this alternate universe where like I did very well in school because I just didn't have to worry about money. I didn't have to clock in 20 plus hours and do all those other things. And it just pains me to know that like there's some people who think, I mean, now that we're adults, GPA doesn't matter so much, but there's probably some people who think I worked so hard in college, that's why I got a 4 point whatever. I'm like, I wish I could tell those people you didn't have to go through the shit I had to go through. But it's also like I'm grateful that we went through when we're young. That's why like I always empathize with immigrants that move later in life because the reason why we could afford to like smuggle Tupperware and do all those shit is because we were young. We could afford to eat bad food because our health would take us. So like I'm at least grateful that a lot of these hustling came when we were like younger. But another thing about class is that like we are talking about wealth specifically, but what about like the social norms of being wealthy? Like the ways in which they carry themselves, the way you signal to the other person, look, I am part of your class.
Give me an example though.
A good example is like, okay, I even caught myself doing this, and this is me. Like, I never tried to play status games, but when I was in the Bay Area, right? And in the Bay Area, right, how many black people are there? Like, 2.5 black people in the entire Bay Area. And a lot of times, even when are like they're never in tech. Like they're always in like support roles. Like they're always the ones supporting the entire system. And I had this my Facebook backpack from my first internship. That shit was torn to pieces. It was just a hot mess. So I had to get a new backpack. And I was like, which backpack should I get? And without even thinking, like I just got this expensive, what is it? My Timbuktu backpack, right? And I got the expensive Bose headphones, right? And I know that those things are good and they work, but I realized that the reason why I'm getting those things is to tell the other software engineers and tech people, look, I am one of you, without even knowing. Like it took a lot of introspection to get here. It's also just like how like there was this movie, I forget what it is, but there's this like white conservative man and he's going to a dinner in Yale, and it was one of these like fancy dinners, right? And then they have all the silverware laid out. And he's like, why are there like three forks and seven spoons? Which one am I meant to use? And it's like that way in which you're subtly able to signal to people, look, I am part of your class. I even remember when I was talking to this like exec that I knew, very smart person, and and he said something to the effect of he got his MBA to impress the people he needed to impress. And he talks about wearing his class ring so that whenever he goes out to these places, he can actually show them, look, I went to this high Ivy League school. So that's what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I was so oblivious to that though. Like, you remember how
Mm.
people would pay so much money to get their SMC ring? SMC means St. Mary's,
Mm.
or the Notre
Yeah.
Dame ring, and like having like rubies and diamonds. I was like, why are you paying to have a ring of your school? I could not
Yeah.
understand for the life of me what it meant. But then, like when I
Mm.
like started, you know, um, going into the workforce, and like one of our like the president is an alumni of Notre Dame. And like all these Notre
Mm.
Dame kids like would see each other, and like they all had this ring. I
Mm.
was like, this is very cult like shit. But it's class basically. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
this is
Class.
like it's like, hey, I we have this in common. And obviously it
Mm.
works, right? I have a friend that,
Yes.
because she's a Notre Dame alumni, she reached out to the president of
Mm.
at
Mm.
Microsoft, and she got a job, like a six-figure job. And it was just,
Mm.
the fact that it was, hey, we're from the same,
Yeah.
not really class, same school, but yeah, Notre Dame is a big
Yeah.
school though, so like same class.
Yeah.
So I see the value in it. It's just that I'm
Mm.
very oblivious to these things. Obviously, the whole
Mm.
backpack thing, yeah, like that's part of like the tech trash, um,
Mm.
like movement, I suppose. Like I know I literally have my Microsoft bag and I travel with it.
Mm.
And I mean, to me it's just a bag, but I guess it has
Mm.
the whole Microsoft logo and everything. So it's like, oh yeah, I'm up there, I
Yeah.
suppose. But it's not even, I don't do it on purpose, like you said.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Another thing about class is how it continually feeds into itself. Like even with the Notre, like the alumni network thing, because there's something like what's that thing where you get admission if your parents went or if you have a relative that went into it.
Oh,
Um,
legacy.
legacy admissions, exactly. What it
Yeah,
does is
yeah,
say this cycle we want to keep it going. We want to still pick from this certain group of people. Even the same thing happens in hiring. The more people who go to your college who went to your college that work in a certain place, it will just feed into itself and just keep the cycle going. And one other thing is that
yeah,
it socially isolates you so much. Like I took a PBS quiz, which I'll link in the description below, but it basically tells you if you are socially isolated or if you're in a bubble in America. And legitimately, the higher your score is, the less likely you're in a bubble. Like you understand mainstream American culture, and but the lower you are, the more you are in a bubble. And legitimately, I got like 17 out of a score of like I think 100 or something. And I am literally somebody who lived in America for 7 years. But even something like the majority of people around you having a degree, that socially isolates you. It literally picks from a certain group of people, even something to the effect of the kind of TV you watch and what names mean to you. Like they said something, what does Bradson mean to you? And I said the first thing is Richard Bradson from Virgin, but I guess there's another meaning that somebody who didn't grow up in like I guess socioeconomic class would know. And even something like what kind of TV do you watch? Do you watch Dr. Oz? Do you watch Wendy Williams? Like it's
yeah.
wild to know that these things are still class signifiers without you really sitting down to analyze them.
Yeah, yeah. But it's also, I don't know, like the thing is, I was never, when I went to school in the US and I was working in the US and all of that stuff, I never tried to assimilate. Like, it was always,
Mm,
okay, I'm an international student, I'm other, I'm
mm.
literally labeled as an alien. I have no interest. I have no interest in assimilating American culture,
Yeah.
whatever it might be.
Mm,
You know, I always thought of like, okay, like the whole thing, there's some things obviously I could not learn, right? The fact that
mm,
being black is a thing in America, I'm black. Like I couldn't not be that, right? But a lot of the things, like like a lot of the socioeconomic or like just political, as long as
mm,
it didn't affect me, I tried to not
mhm,
even learn about it because like
mm,
I was never, it was never my goal to become American or feel like I'm part
mm,
of America. I'm like I'm
mm,
in and out. I'm here to get my grind on, to like better my
mm,
life, but not because I want to be American. I'm just here
mm.
to leverage the resources around and get out. So
Yeah.
I know my score will probably be very low, but it's
Mm,
like it's because I don't try. Like I don't try to
mm.
know about all that stuff.
But do you even feel like
I don't
if
know
you
if
had
that's a good
tried,
thing
you would
though.
have succeeded? Like, do you feel like
No.
if you had tried, you'd have succeeded? Because, like, the thing about America is that, like San Francisco and the Bay Area culture, New York and New York culture, those are like the predominant culture types that are like pushed out even outside America. Like, any random
Mm.
person that's lived only in the Bay Area does not know what people in the Midwest are doing, has no inkling, has no understanding, like knows nothing. And so for you to even try
Yeah.
to understand that, you have to be willing to put yourself in situations that you have no interest, no reason to be in. I even remember,
Yeah.
don't you remember how like
Yeah.
Notre Dame was like this very rich town with all these really nice buildings that led up to Notre Dame? But if you just moved outside and you saw South Bend and Mishawaka, you're like, what? Like, legit, and they're just beside each other.
I know, I know, I know. Oh my god, that used to be like really like shocking. Cause like the first time I
Mhm.
went to ND, I was like,
Mm,
wow, wow, I didn't know like this was a thing. And then I saw
mm,
Mishawaka and I was like, wow, how? Like you can clearly see all the money goes into this place, but not here.
yes. Yeah.
Like there's no
I said,
homeless people in Notre Dame. Have you noticed that?
mm,
There's not a single
fam, they
homeless
are.
person.
Fam. And even like the same thing when I was in DC, because I spent 2 summers in DC, and then I now came back after post graduation, like 5 years later. And literally, when I was there for my first 2 summers, and the part of DC I was in, it looked like a just a general okay neighborhood. Not too much.
Mm-hmm.
You pass some parts, people be smoking weed, but it was okay. And now when I came back, every other home is a new building. Literally, the building beside the house I was living in had been torn down and turned into expensive condos. Legitimately, the church that was run down and they had been boarded up, they have renovated that thing and turned it into expensive condos. There was literally like
Mm.
somebody sitting down on his porch there reading his newspaper in front of the church. I was like, this is the place where people used to get shot at before coming up. And legitimately, I was like, I know that that's gentrification, but that's also like one of the wildest things about like America is that like I think how it works in Nigeria more is that like if gentrification is to come into a neighborhood, it's swallowing the entire neighborhood. There's not going to be patches of like
Mm.
good houses and bad houses, but just seeing how like the gentrification encroaches on a neighborhood and how it slowly pushes people out. Wow. And it's so wild. It is. And the problem with the class dynamics in America is that it's not the Jeff Bezos and the Kanye West that are actually causing it. It's what they call the top 10%. It's the software engineers, the mobile doctors, the mobile lawyers that will slowly buy up the properties. They say once an interracial couple and a woman with a poodle move into your neighborhood, gentrification has set in. It's actually never the Kanye West that moves in first. It's the lady with the
Yeah.
poodle that wants the matcha latte that moves in first. And I'm like, bruh.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's like, because I mean, I live in Vancouver right now for context, and Vancouver is one of the most expensive city in Canada, but it's also one
Mm,
of the most empty because a lot of people
mm,
over in Asia and in China bought houses, full like houses cash, a whole neighborhood worth, which means that the
mm,
locals couldn't afford to pay rent anymore because they're like, I guess it's the same thing that's happening in Portugal. And like those
Yes,
houses
Lisbon.
are
Yep.
they're only summer houses for them. In the winter, those
Yeah.
places are empty, and people are
Yeah.
homeless.
Yeah.
So I was just like, yeah, it's crazy.
And the fact that
So
like we've lived in so many.
essentially you're contributing to the whole gentrification of Portugal right now.
Yes, I said, fam, the worst thing about politics, right? About having political consciousness is realize that you're the problem too. Like that's why I hate every
Yeah.
form of like check mark Twitter because you can't be making over 200. In fact, you know that in America, if you make over something like 130K pre-recession, you are already part of like the top 10%, something crazy like that. So somebody that's earning like 300,000 talking about class politics, sir, you better just walk yourself to the gate because you're part of the problem. And like, and so yes, like you realize you're part of the problem, but like in Lisbon, to give some context, I live in Lisbon. Like what happened is that they had the golden visa here, and what that means is that if you buy a certain property before in Lisbon, now you have to buy inside Portugal more because they've bought out the entire fucking Lisbon, and the government was like, we need people in the rest of Portugal. um when you buy a property here over a certain amount of money, you get you're issued a permanent like a permanent residence, and you only need to be in Lisbon or Portugal as a whole for like 7 days in the year. And then after 5 years, if you can prove that you have some ties to the community and prove that you have some language proficiency, you become a Portuguese citizen. So I was talking to my real estate agent, and he was telling I'm showing me an apartment. Actually, the two apartments I saw were both owned by foreign residents. One had been empty for like 2 years because the person just bought it and didn't know what to do with it. And then I asked him, "Oh, like, is this a common thing for like apartments to just be empty in Lisbon?" And he was like, "Yes, it is very common for apartments to just be empty because they've been bought out by foreign residents, and now it's driving the prices up everywhere." And it's so weird because I don't know where there isn't a housing problem. Like somewhere, where isn't there a housing problem? Because legitimately, every major city is facing it in different ways. To give some context, I lived in Dublin before, and Dublin, from what I understand, it's the venture firms that come out and buy large properties because they notice that,
The
I mean, with
taxes.
Brexit, exactly, with Brexit also, what that meant is that all the businesses that wanted access to the EU moved to Ireland, and they just see a property in Ireland as a good investment. Legitimately, the neighborhood I was, there was literally a row of houses empty, empty. Some new, some old, just empty. And another thing is that like it goes back into that class thing, is that the class of people that are benefiting from the investments from the golden visas, yes, they are the Jeff Bezos and the Kanye West, but those are still there are so few of actually people that ultra rich. It's actually the kind of mobile doctors who have been in the profession for 12 years that can afford to make a $200,000 like deposit and then end up pushing the problems this way. So they have no incentive. The politicians that make so much money have no incentive to fix the problem. Legitimately, my lawyer said, no, my real estate agent said, yes, they're about to start taxing crypto in Portugal and in the EU, but don't worry, they'll put a loophole in because the people who create the laws also create the loopholes too. And I'm like, bruh,
Yeah. Oh my God, you still have your St. Mary's shirt. I got rid of all of that.
yes, I'm wearing my St. Mary's class of 2017 shirt. I just wore
Wow.
it because living in a hotel is ghetto.
Yeah.
Another thing, like, Another thing about class, especially with race, is how like when you're black, you always want to show that you have some semblance of class. But because every black person they see is in the service industry, I want them to be able to. I'm not trying to
Tell?
alienate myself from other black people. That I'm sure I'm not part of the service industry, and there's nothing wrong with not being part of the service
Yeah.
industry or being part of it. But like, there's this interplay that class and race plays into that black people do not want to talk about, and that's where like you see in the events how a lot of black people feel the need to show up and show out because we want to show that even though race is a problem, we are part of the same class. Yeah,
Yeah. Like essentially changing the narrative, right? Because for instance,
exactly.
like take it like if I walked into Microsoft, um
Mm,
somebody might assume that I am a business admin, right? If they
mm,
see me, they
mm,
might think I am like a secretary.
mm.
They will assume that. They will not think that I am a product manager
Yeah,
just because, like,
yeah.
just the narrative, I guess, like you said, like, and like, I don't think it bothers me so much, but I mean, once it happens a little bit too much, you're like, what the hell, you know?
Yeah.
Like I don't work
And
here. I'm here to eat,
yeah,
just like you.
you exactly.
Or
And you know that
yeah, yeah.
I was about to say, like, don't you remember the software engineer in Google who complained that people called Google security on him because he was riding a
Mm,
bicycle and they didn't think he worked there? And this is the reality that, like, this is why you buy the expensive Bose headphones and the Patagonia backpack and
mm,
all those other things to somewhat signal, look, I am part of this tribe. It's like when you're like you're trying to wear some camouflage to say, look, I am part of this flock of birds too. Legitimately, that's what we're doing.
yeah, pretty much, pretty much.
And
But I feel
then
like
like.
it should be. Sorry, please finish your thought.
No, just go ahead. Just go
I was
ahead.
gonna say
Yeah.
I was thinking like there's nothing wrong with the whole let me wear camouflage to look like I'm part of the crowd or whatever, but I think it should also be let me single myself out in a way that like pleases me. Like for example, I don't
Mhm,
think it's good or healthy to go buy an
mhm,
expensive watch to impress others
mhm,
if it like otherwise you wouldn't have bought the watch. Do you know what I mean?
mm, yeah. Yeah.
Like okay, if you're gonna like quote unquote try to match the crowd or whatever, do it in a way that like you also gain some satisfaction out of it. Like
Mm, mm,
for example, I'll give you like an example. Like I hate driving.
mm,
I hate driving.
mm,
But when I first started working at Microsoft, I needed a car to get there, and I got
mm,
this like expensive ass car. And at
mm.
the time, like I was happy with it, but it's like I hate driving. Why am I
Yeah.
buying a $50,000 car?
Yeah.
Like a Toyota could have been okay, right?
Yeah.
So that was like my lesson. I was like, okay, like sure, spoil you, like
Yeah.
assimilate, but or no, wear the camera flash, but make sure that it makes sense to you. Like if it wasn't for the crowd around you, would you still buy that thing?
It's right that
Is
thing.
what I
Yep.
asked myself.
Another thing is how, like in tech, and just like this open floor plan thing, we're meant to see everybody as egalitarian, but one person beside you could be making four times as much as you're making. So there's this like disconnect where like seeing your coworker who wears the same hoodie like you, still has the same like Patagonia backpack, but that person is going back to a home that they own in like Pacific Heights or somewhere expensive. And
Yeah,
you're going back
yeah.
to your studio that you're sharing with seven other people. And so, like, I think being able to actually be honest about your circumstance, and
Mm,
especially if you're like an international student that has family that you take care of, or just other people that depend on you, like, you legitimately cannot be living like your peers who, even if they're your direct classmates who have no dependents. Like, and
mm-hmm.
it's unfortunate. And another thing that about class is how even when you like break out, because if you're a software engineer, a PM, and you start making six figures, you're automatically put in the top 10% of Americans, like without even thinking about it. Is how if you grew up or knew yourself to be poor, you can't even imagine yourself as not poor.
Yeah.
I literally have a male friend, former coworker, who grapples with the idea that he will be a millionaire when our former company goes public. Like it keeps him up at night because he grew up lower middle class. So for him, he doesn't even understand. Like when they say tax the rich, he cannot think of himself as part of the problem, and he really
Mm,
isn't. He's literally just somebody who owns a home and happened to get some like stock options that did well. But like he is, but he really isn't.
mm,
So I don't know.
mm. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I don't know. I feel like those are the conversations I like having solutions to things, and when I start
Mm,
thinking that way, like it stresses me out because I'm like, okay, I'm trying to
mm,
do this to better my life, but I'm also part of the
yeah.
problem. Yeah, so I just try like I acknowledge it, but unless there's a solution to it, I don't like
You don't
why am
acknowledge
I
it.
why am I
And
staying up at night?
mm, I also really hate how this don't go to college narrative or invest in crypto. All these scammy things are pushed on black people because the best way to actually move a socioeconomic class is to go to college, is to try your best to actually get into those spaces. Because by virtue of you being able to LARP, look, I'm a Notre Dame alum like you are literally entering a class that you would not have entered into. So I hate
Yeah.
how the idea of don't go to college is pushed on black people because we actually need to go to college and study the hard majors more than any other group or demographic.
Yeah, I agree. Especially also like I don't know, like I see a lot of that on Tech Talk, like the Tech Talk
Mm,
on Tik like videos. It's like, oh, I have a six-figure job. I just did this certificate and blah blah blah. You have to think about like, especially as an international student, like you are not the target audience. This is not the life for you.
mm, exactly.
Please, okay? Like if you want to make it in America, go to college. Try to do
Yeah,
let it be the best school you can afford, the best school that you can get
yeah,
into, and study STEM. Like that's
yeah.
the best way. That's the formula to
That's the
success if you're an
secret.
international student. There's no other
Yeah,
narrative as of today.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And I also even
yeah,
think that people make themselves seem far more clever than they actually are. Like, it's very hard for an individual to have as much leverage as like an institution. Like, when you say you are a Notre Dame alum, you get all the Notre Dame leverage by virtue of proximity. How many people have built up a reputation where they can say, I am this person, and that opens doors for them. So literally, you're just when you go to an expensive school, a good school, whichever school, you're basically borrowing their leverage, you're borrowing their legacy and putting it on yourself
the
to help
brand.
yourself.
Yeah,
So exactly exactly. And I think that just and people pushing that agenda, but I always knew the internet was full of scammers and perverts and a lot of other fishy people, so like I'm not surprised that people push this kind of narrative. But like I just say the fact that it's pushed on black people because the black kids need to hear, like you said, go to college, study STEM, and try to make a way for yourself based off of that. And if you're an international student and you don't get into a very good college the first time, should you consider transferring, Gaju?
like so. For instance,
Should you take it?
when I look at SMC versus Notre Dame, right? I got into SMC. The only reason why I
Mm,
went to SMC is because it's of its proximity to Notre Dame.
Dream. Yeah,
Uh, and I don't think it would have been as easy for me to get into Microsoft and get the internship if it wasn't for the Notre Dame brand.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
think yes, you should try to
Yeah.
transfer to a better school.
Yeah. I also think that people should realize that there are far more options than they have in their portfolio. Like, I knew that all women colleges are attached to big schools. So, if you can get into a big school, if you're a woman, maybe applying to an all women's college might be very good for you. Or if, like, that's if you're an international student. I don't know if international students are allowed to go to community colleges, but like a lot of
They are,
community
they
colleges
are.
also have pipelines. Oh, they are? Okay, perfect.
Hmm.
So, a lot of community colleges also have pipelines to big schools. So, that could also be an option. It could also be that, so knowing those options are at your disposal, and even trying, like at least if you can try again after your first year, you at least know, do I have better options out there versus not? And I don't know, just taking as many shots as possible because if there's something about American society is that America is one of the few places in the world that will reward you for trying, even if you fail.
Yeah,
Like there's very few
yeah.
societies where you can like literally fail up in society, and America is one of them. So legitimately be bold as an international student and take as many risks as possible because that's the kind of society you live in. And use every resource at your disposal because you are basically almost trying to do the impossible if you are not a rich international student. You are basically moving to a new country and trying to move to a new class. Two problems at the same time. So leverage your school administrators, leverage your career centers, leverage any resource you have because one, you're paying for those resources. Two, you're paying twice as much as everybody else. And
Hmm.
yeah, just use all the resources at your disposal.
Yeah, another route, if I wasn't going to go to SMC, I was going to go to a college in Santa Clara, California.
Mm,
And it was a program, 2-year program that directly transfer you to a UC school. So
mm,
it's possible to do that. And
yeah,
we would have been cheaper, but I mean, I went with SMC at the end. But the
mm,
thing is, like, because I talked to a lot of international students, one thing that really, it even annoys me at this point, it's
mm,
like like the limiting beliefs that a lot of international students have of like, oh, I can't get
mm,
into this school, like you're not even trying.
yeah,
And I'm like,
yeah,
who told you you can't? Like
mm,
who told you that you don't have the capabilities? And
mm,
the limiting beliefs of like, oh, I'm not smart enough to do this, or I can't put myself out there. like you said, America is one of the few societies in the world that rewards you for trying and putting yourself out there.
Mhm.
If you don't advocate for yourself, no one is gonna know about you, and you're not gonna survive.
Yeah.
There's a reason why the extroverts mostly like are the people that succeed the most, the people that post on
Yeah.
LinkedIn the most, the people that overshare or just put themselves out. Like it doesn't matter how you feel. It's just that the data shows that by even trying or by showing up, even if you feel so uncomfortable, you just have
Mm.
better chances at success in anything as an
Yeah.
international student. And I just wish like there's a way for me to like remove that limiting belief that, oh, I can't get into this company, I can't get into this top company, so I'm not even gonna apply. I can't get into this top school, so I'm not even gonna apply. Like why?
Yeah.
Where is this coming from? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's the biggest sabotage that I see international students. They
This
just
is
aim low.
Yeah. And it's also like depending on which culture you come from, it could have been like pushed on you, like you could have learned that. But you're in America. You're literally in America,
Yeah.
like the place where people can become billionaires that do private companies that take them out of space. Like legitimately, that's the best thing about America is that like the crazies actually, even when you see America's history, like is the people who didn't want the British, you're like, nah, fam, we're moving here. Like if you know that you're in that society, you actually have to adjust your beliefs to match the society you're in. And another thing is that just knowing that like we're in a new globally interconnected world. Like we have doctors who are now TikTok influencers, which that's a whole problem on its own. But just knowing that like you have far more resources and far more things going for you, and just being willing to try and try your best given the circumstance you're in. It's hard and nobody's going to actually tell you in college. The and you also are not in the same dilemma as your peers because your roommates or your people in your class that are citizens are not facing the same problems. They are living on vibes, packing up as much student loans to live on those vibes. You have a clear deadline, you need to get a job or you be kicked out. You have clear markers of success. So knowing that you are not playing the same game with other people and being willing to optimize towards your success and knowing that if they are running fast, you have to run 10 times as fast. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think personally, there's no point at getting irritated by that.
Mm,
Because
yeah.
I've also noticed that, like, there's a lot of things. I mean, yes, I'm gonna admit the
Mm,
system is not optimized for international student in the US. Got
mhm.
it. But until there's a solution, like, just play the game. Like, being upset is not gonna help.
Yeah.
Like, I
You
don't
know,
see
it's so
that.
helping. You know, it's so funny that
Yeah.
you bring this up because I recently met a startup founder. He was also an international student, and he's working on a company that he wants to be the like suite for all the tools that international students would need to not just come to America with regards to like setting up your bank account and having a SIM card, but also thrive eventually in America. The company's name is called Ellis, and I have a link below for you to sign up for that company. But like the founder is a very mission-driven company. A lot of people in the company are actually international students or immigrants themselves. And a company like this needs to exist because America's greatest advantage is the fact that people come there knowing that I can take as many shots as possible to succeed. And if you want to sign up for the company, as I said earlier, the link will be below. And the name of the company is called Ellis. And it's basically based on the fact that, like, when immigrants came to America, they came, I think it was Ellis Island. I don't know the exact story, but what is in New York. And yeah, we need more tools for international students. But another thing is that, like, if you're a friend of an international student, you don't need to pity the person or make the person feel
Yeah.
bad because legitimately, like, nobody picks the cards they're dealt with in life. And if you're an international student, you don't need to feel bad about yourself. You just need to, like, focus on how you're going to get to the next step. And another thing I
Mm-hmm.
remember is when I was leaving America because of the fact I didn't get the H1B, and all my American friends would be like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, you didn't do anything to me. Like, you legitimately did nothing wrong. But, like, the
Yeah.
last thing anybody needs for being born in the wrong country, being born in the wrong parts of the world, is pity. Because nobody chose that
Yeah.
about themselves. It's just use what you have, start where you're at, do what you can. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you there. Yeah, I know somebody that tried for the H1B 17 times.
17 times. Fam,
17
do you know
times.
they're legitimately young, like kids of Indian descent who think they're American citizens, but who the H-1B has kept their parents in this perpetual trap. I remember when my company was trying to apply for the H-1B, and I joked that people complain that the Indian backlog, because what happens is when you get the H-1B, right, you then can apply for the green card. But the thing about the green card is that employment-based green cards are capped at 7% per company, per country. So literally, countries like India and China have a massive backlog because so many people get the H-1B and want to get the green card. So they are literally young children who of Indian descent who literally only know themselves as US citizens. But when it's time to apply for college, they literally realize they're international students because their parents are still on the H-1B. And my immigration attorney at that point said that the timeline for for Indian immigrants to get their green card, employment-based green card, is 30 years, 30 whole years. Like somebody can be born and give birth to a child, and that child gives birth to another child, and you are still on the H1.
Yeah. No, that's insane. But obviously that cycle breaks as soon as the child is born in the US though. You could just get the
Yes, but
citizenship
if
through
they
the
moved
child.
when they were younger, yeah,
Yeah, then
that's true. That's
that
true.
yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, don't you have to sponsor? You have to be like 18 to sponsor a parent, right? Something to the effect of you have to be a certain age and make a certain
Exactly.
income.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
that's still shorter than waiting for the employment based green card.
that is fair. That
Like
is
18
fair.
years versus 30.
Versus 30. Kaju, I think we can wrap it up here if you're okay,
Yeah.
if you're good.
Yeah.
I think that's okay. Well, thank you all for coming to our first podcast. We have a Patreon for the first kids. If you want to contribute to that Patreon, the link will be below. We also have separate TikTok accounts, and we have one for this. So if you want to find out more about us, link will be below. And without further ado, we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.